subscribe, like the video, and, if possible, join Patreon. But if you don't have much money, you can support the channel by watching the novels on euroaudiobooks.com. Remember that you can participate in the polls so that your favorite novel gets published for free.
Synopsis. Blayn transmigrates into the world of Akame and obtains the Mangekyō Sharingan. Kamui. Not just one, but both Kamui. 1. Chapter 1. Double Kamui. Did I really transmigrate? Blayn could only recall being hit by a dump truck, his vision going dark, and then suddenly waking up in another world. Just now, the system informed him that this was the world of Akame. At first, he struggled to accept it. After all, transmigration was something that only happened in novels and comics, right? But now, he had no choice but to face reality. His landing point in this world had been directly on top of a monster's head, startling it awake. It was a tiger-shaped special-class danger beast, massive in size and far more terrifying than an ordinary tiger. Its paws alone dwarfed Blayn's entire body, and its gleaming claws were at least a meter long. Blayn's double Kamui was about to prove useful. That's right, the Mangekyō Sharingan's Kamui. And not just in one eye, both eyes had it. This was the special ability granted to him by the system upon transmigration. The moment the beast lunged at him, Blayn swiftly activated the intangibility ability of his right eye's Kamui. The danger beast's gaping maw, lined with jagged fangs, passed through him harmlessly. His body phased straight through the massive creature's head, and without wasting a second, he took off in another direction, trying to shake it off. After running for a while, he spotted a woman in a pure white military uniform up ahead. Thanks to his Mangekyō Sharingan-enhanced vision, he could see her clearly from a distance. Her long blue hair stood out strikingly, and her exquisitely cold expression was like an ice sculpture. Delicate features, ice blue eyelashes, piercing eyes, and skin as flawless as freshly fallen snow. But Blayn had no time to admire her beauty. He was still being chased. Even though the danger beast had failed to hit him multiple times, it continued pursuing him relentlessly. After all, danger beasts weren't known for their intelligence. Looks like I dragged an innocent person into this. I should help her. The thought flashed through Blayn's mind. Although he had ways to escape, the woman would likely become the beast's next target. He didn't want innocent people to suffer because of him, and his conscience wouldn't allow him to ignore it. At the same time, he realized he had to shake off the danger beast. His body was noticeably weaker, and his eyes throbbed with pain. If he used another eye technique now, his body might not be able to handle it. His best option was to use his remaining intangibility time to escape. The energy cost of double Kamui was absurdly high, even with the system enhancing his body beyond human limits. Otherwise, a single use of his eye techniques might have killed him outright. He had ways to further strengthen himself, but now wasn't the time to think about that. On this day, Isdeth, newly appointed as a general of the Empire, had been tasked with subjugating a special-class danger beast near the Empire's southern border. She led a squad of soldiers on the mission. However, this was no ordinary special-class danger beast. It was on the verge of evolving into a super rank. At this point, Isdeth had yet to obtain the Ice Taigu, Demon God Manifestation, Demon's Extract. Her entire squad had been wiped out in battle, and even she had to pay a steep price to finally slay the beast. She suddenly noticed a figure in the distance, being chased by a danger beast. Judging by its size and appearance, it was another special-class danger beast. Her brows furrowed slightly. She was still nursing serious injuries and wasn't confident she could take on another one. She wasn't sure if the young man was deliberately leading the beast toward her, but she prepared for battle nonetheless. Without hesitation, she drew a long sword from her waist, a weapon resembling a fencing épée, but much heavier, and braced herself. As the black-clad youth charged straight at her, her fighting spirit ignited even further. Blayn ran directly toward his death, completely ignoring the sword tip aimed at his head, and grabbed her wrist. The moment he touched her, Isdeth was affected by his Kamui's intangibility, allowing him to make contact with her. She was stunned when her sword passed cleanly through his head without harming him. In that moment of surprise, she didn't react immediately when he grabbed her wrist. As he pulled her along, Blayn said in a low voice, "I have no hostility toward you." Isdetha's expression flickered. She hadn't expected him to simply grab her and run as if he had every intention of taking her with him. However, she sensed no hostility from him. And in her current condition, she wasn't in a position to fight the danger beast head-on. So, she let him lead her away. Soon, they reached the edge of a cliff. Looking down, it was at least 1,000 meters to the bottom. Without hesitation, Blayn jumped. Isdeth hesitated for a brief moment. She hadn't expected the youth to leap without a second thought. And since he was still holding her wrist, she was pulled down with him. In midair, she quickly adjusted her posture, attempting to stab her sword into the cliffside to slow their fall. But to her shock, the blade pierced the rock effortlessly, as if slicing through air. Their descent didn't slow in the slightest. Isdeth, having never encountered anything like this before, was momentarily at a loss, unable to comprehend what was happening. The reason was simple. Blayn was still holding on to her, and she remained affected by his intangibility. Noticing her reaction, Blayn reassured her, "Don't worry, we'll be fine." "Are you a taiga user?" Isdeth quickly deduced that his strange abilities must be tied to some kind of power. In this world, the Empire was an ancient civilization with a 1,000-year history, standing as the most powerful nation. 1,000 years ago, the first emperor had created 48 taigu, powerful relics forged at great cost to maintain his rule. However, 500 years ago, a great war scattered many taigu across the land and even beyond the empire's borders. If this young man was a taiga user, it would explain his supernatural abilities. Blayn didn't answer her question. For one, he was focused on observing the valley below. For another, he had no idea what a taiga user even was. That's right, Blayn barely knew anything about the world of Akame Kill. He'd only heard of it, but had never watched or read it. He'd heard it was too tragic, so he never dared to experience it firsthand. As a result, he didn't recognize Isdeth at all. Even though he remained silent, Isdeth continued to stare intently at his crimson eyes. Her instincts told her that these unusual, blood-red pupils were likely a taigu. After all, what kind of normal person had 3 sickle-shaped tomo in their eyes? Chapter 2. Isdetha's intuition was razor-sharp. Though the Mangekyō Sharingan's double Kamui wasn't a taigu, it was undoubtedly the source of Blayn's abilities. Being under Isdetha's intense scrutiny for so long made Blayn feel slightly awkward, but he maintained a composed and unreadable demeanor. On the other hand, Isdeth felt a hint of disappointment. She hadn't been able to discern anything significant just by observing him. Had Blayn averted his gaze even slightly, she would have been more certain that his eyes were, in fact, a taigu. Before long, they reached the bottom of the ravine. While Isdeth acknowledged Blayn's abilities, she remained cautious. She couldn't dismiss the possibility that he might suddenly let go and send her plummeting. After all, they had only just met. If she wasn't at least this wary, she wouldn't be fit to call herself a general of the Empire. Only when Blayn landed them safely on the surface of a river did she allow herself to relax. Just a little. "There's a river down here, but we're floating on the surface, aren't we?" Isdetha's voice was cool, yet carried an elegant lilt. "Yeah." Blayn responded nonchalantly, still holding onto her wrist as he guided them toward the shore. Only once they reached solid ground did he release her wrist and deactivate intangibility. "Apologies for being so forward." The situation was urgent. Though he had only grabbed her wrist, he was mindful of the fact that she was a woman and thought it proper to acknowledge it. However, Isdeth didn't seem to care about such trivialities. She walked over to a large rock and drove her sword into it, testing its solidity. Seeing that it pierced through effortlessly without leaving a single scratch confirmed that everything had returned to normal. This also reaffirmed that, while her sword wasn't a taigu, it was far from ordinary. The sheer quality of the blade was evident. It could slice through solid rock without sustaining even the slightest dent. This very sword had accompanied her through countless battles, until the day of her final stand. "Looks like things are back to normal." So, It really was your ability, Isteth said, turning her gaze toward Blayn. For the first time, Blayn took a good look at her. He hadn't had the chance, or the inclination, to do so before. Beyond her striking beauty, she carried herself with a commanding presence. She stood at around 1.7 meters tall, and with her high-heeled boots, she wasn't much shorter than him. Her military uniform was clearly not standard issue for an ordinary soldier, and the aura she exuded radiated dominance and power. Blayn briefly wondered if high-heeled boots would be a hindrance in battle, but he kept the thought to himself. Even without knowing her identity, it was clear from her sheer presence alone that she was no ordinary person. From Isteth's perspective, it wasn't Blayn's slightly youthful yet handsome face or his lean build that intrigued her the most. It was his blood-red eyes, with their peculiar shape. Something like that. Blayn replied indifferently as he sat down on a nearby rock to rest. Just using intangibility had drained him considerably. Double Kamui was an ability with an enormous energy cost. Even Ibito had required Hashirama cells to freely use just a single Kamui, and the toll of double Kamui was even greater. Without enhancements, there was no way Blayn could wield it effortlessly. Now that he had a moment to breathe, he focused on examining the system. With a thought, he brought up the system panel. Host, Blayn, age, 18 strength, 20 average for an adult male, 10 agility, 20 average for an adult male, 10 constitution, 20 average for an adult male, 10 system points, 0 system shop. LV1, all three of his attributes were at 20, twice that of an average adult male. This, of course, was a starting bonus from the system. Thanks to his 20 points in constitution, using intangibility hadn't completely exhausted him. His double Kamui had been modified by the system. Since he had no chakra in this world, he wouldn't have been able to use it otherwise. Instead of consuming chakra, the ability now drained his body's cells. The higher his constitution, the more active his cells became, granting full body regeneration and increased endurance. This regeneration applied to his body, injuries, and even his eye power, meaning as long as he wasn't instantly killed or blinded, he could recover over time. Strength dictated his physical power. Agility affected movement speed, reaction speed, and perception. But in the end, system points were the most important. They were necessary for upgrades through the system shop. According to the system, he could earn points by hunting danger beasts or defeating enemies. Without this explanation, he wouldn't have even known what a danger beast was. The system had also provided their ranking from weakest to strongest. Class 4 class, 3 class, 2 class, 1 special class, super rank the stronger the danger beast, the more points he could earn. For now, Blayn simply sat and rested, allowing his body and eye power to regenerate. As for the tiger-shaped special class danger beast from earlier, it likely wasn't foolish enough to jump down after them. If it did, all the better. Falling from this height would either kill it outright or cripple it, making it easy prey. The sun's already setting. We should camp here for the night, Isteth finally said. During her previous battle against the special class danger beast, her horse had been killed, leaving her unable to return to the capital quickly. With years of experience hunting danger beasts, she knew traveling at night was unwise. Many were at their most dangerous after dark, while humans were far more vulnerable. Besides, she was still recovering from her injuries. Resting here wasn't a bad idea. You're a soldier of the Empire, aren't you? Blayn asked casually. All he knew about Akame kill was that it took place in an empire, and that the empire itself was far from benevolent. That was the extent of his knowledge. That's right. To be precise, I'm a general. My name is Isteth. And you? Isteth's tone was gentle. Though ruthless toward her enemies, she was known to be kind and approachable toward her subordinates and the Empire's civilians. Since Blayn had just saved her, it was only natural that she wouldn't be hostile. Blayn, as he answered, Blayn became more cautious. From what little he knew, the Empire wasn't exactly a force for good. There was no telling whether its generals were trustworthy. With his naturally cautious personality, he wasn't about to let his guard down. Blayn, huh? I'll remember that. Isteth, on the other hand, found her first impression of him quite favorable. His name suggested he was from the Empire rather than a foreigner. The fact that he didn't recognize her, despite her high status, implied that, like her, he might have come from the Empire's borderlands rather than the capital, where her name was well known. For him to be out here, encountering a special-class danger beast, he was likely hunting it, which showed courage. And of course, he had just saved her life. 3. Chapter 3. Hunting dangerous beasts. Just then, the river suddenly surged, its surface no longer as calm as before. Something was clearly wrong. Blayn suspected that another danger beast was about to appear. Oh, just in time. Isteth, on the other hand, seemed already certain of the danger beast's presence. Without hesitation, she drew her long sword from the rock, sending her silver-blue hair whipping through the air as an intense battle aura erupted from her. In the next moment, a massive fish-shaped danger beast leaped out of the water. It was at least 4 or 5 meters long, its disproportionately large head lined with rows of razor-sharp teeth. Its gaping maw lunged toward the nearest target, Isteth, Level 3 Danger Beast. A cold, arrogant smile curled Isteth's lips, tinged with confidence and disdain. Without a hint of hesitation, she launched herself forward, her agile form soaring several meters into the air. Her sword pierced through the fish's open mouth and emerged from the top of its skull, cutting straight through its head. That single strike was nearly fatal. Isteth moved with blinding speed. The moment she withdrew her sword, she delivered several more slashes, effortlessly dismembering the fish-shaped danger beast into large chunks. This wasn't mere overkill. She was preparing the meat for dinner later. An ordinary observer wouldn't even be able to track her movements with the naked eye. But Blayn was far from ordinary. Through his Mangekyō Sharingan, Isteth's actions appeared significantly slowed, as if playing out in slow motion. He couldn't help but think that Isteth was truly formidable, and for some reason, she gave him a strangely dangerous feeling. Well, that takes care of dinner, but there sure are a lot of danger beasts around here. Isteth let out a slight sigh. Several more danger beasts had already surrounded them. It seemed this area was teeming with them. Fortunately, none were special-class danger beasts, meaning there was no real pressure in dealing with them. Even without a Taigu, Isteth's raw physical prowess and combat skills were formidable. At that moment, Blayn began to move as well. He yanked out one of the massive teeth from the fish-shaped danger beast. As expected of a danger beast, even a single tooth was about a meter long, looking exceptionally hard and razor-sharp. "What are you doing?" Isteth immediately asked, curious about his actions. "Using its tooth as a weapon," Blayn replied plainly. He couldn't afford to rely too much on the double Kamui's jutsu just yet. While his left eye's Kamui offensive ability could instantly kill any of the danger beasts before him, he had just used intangibility earlier. Using another eye technique so soon without sufficient rest would put too much strain on his body. Besides, he was wary of his death. He felt it best not to reveal any signs of weakness in front of such a dangerous woman. Besides, the base abilities of the Mangekyō Sharingan were already overpowered enough. Beyond enhanced vision, its most crucial feature was its predictive insight. He could foresee an enemy's movements before they even happened. For instance, if an opponent so much as raised a hand, he could deduce their next move based on micro-expressions and muscle tension, making their actions appear much slower in his eyes. His ability to copy techniques and see through illusions relied on this same insight. These core abilities alone were already broken enough. Blayn decided to rely on close combat for now, just like his death. He wasn't necessarily incapable of fighting danger beasts without his eye techniques. This was the perfect chance to test his own strength. "So, your Taigu isn't very offensive?" Isteth asked, slightly surprised. She seemed to have already assumed that Blayn's abilities came from a Taigu. At the same time, her appreciation for him grew. This young man, who appeared even younger than herself, remained calm in the face of numerous danger beasts. Even without a weapon, he was resourceful enough to fashion one from slain beast. Blayn, who had no idea what a Taiga was, didn't bother responding. With an expressionless face, he gripped the fish tooth tightly and charged toward the danger beasts. Hunting danger beasts earned him system points, This was his primary motivation for fighting. His death, on the other hand, held back, curious to see how he would fare without using his so-called Taigu. Blayn's first target was a relatively small plant-type danger beast, a grotesque, towering green flower that stood even taller than him. Its massive, gaping mouth could easily swallow him whole. For now, he decided to call it a man-eating flower. Suddenly, the man-eating flower lashed toward him with astonishing speed. Its stalk could freely extend and retract, stretching several meters in an instant. Anyone unfamiliar with this ability would be caught off guard, falling prey to the flower's trap and becoming its next meal. However, the moment the man-eating flower made the slightest pre-attack motion, Blayn's Mangekyō Sharingan caught it. With perfect timing, he leaped into the air, narrowly dodging the strike. Then, as he descended, he landed precisely atop the creature's head, driving the fish tooth into its stalk. When stretched to its limit, the stalk became thin and fragile, only about the width of an arm. The makeshift weapon sliced through it with ease. Boom! The man-eating flower's massive head crashed to the ground. A fountain of blood gushed from the severed stalk, but Blayn sidestepped just in time to avoid being splattered. Ding! The host has slain a level 4 danger beast. Reward: 1 system point. Blayn had efficiently taken down his first danger beast, but he had no time to rest. Another one was already charging at him. Using the fallen man-eating flower's head as a springboard, he pushed off with a strong kick and flipped backward, just in time to see two long, side-like mantis claws slicing through the spot where he had just been standing. Had he reacted a moment slower, he would have been cleaved in half. That was close. Blayn mentally noted the danger. Fortunately, his cheat was double Kamui. Even relying only on its base abilities, he could still handle this situation with ease. Without hesitation, he drove the fish tooth into the mantis-like danger beast's neck, cleanly severing its head. As the head hit the ground, another notification rang in his mind. Ding! The host has slain a level 4 danger beast. Reward: 1 system point. However, his makeshift weapon had already developed visible cracks. At this rate, it would break after just a few more uses. Undeterred, he yanked the mantis beast's front claws from its corpse. These side-like appendages would serve as his new weapons. Meanwhile, Isteth, who had been silently observing the entire fight, found herself increasingly impressed. This young man had talent. With a Taigu, he had the potential to rise to the rank of a general. Chapter 4. A beautiful but dangerous woman. Ding. The host has hunted a level 4 danger beast. Reward: 1 system point. Ding. The host has hunted a level 3 danger beast. Reward: 3 system points. Blayn quickly took care of the remaining danger beasts. These creatures, classified as level 3 and 4, were terrifying monsters that posed a significant threat to ordinary citizens of the Empire. That was precisely why they were called danger beasts. However, for Blayn, hunting them was effortless. And this was just his base stats, without using the double Kamui jutsu. His abilities could still be enhanced further. System points: 10. After this battle, Blayn had accumulated a total of 10 system points. He immediately opened the system shop. System shop: LV1. Item: Strength +1. Price: 1 system point. Item: Agility +1. Price: 1 system point. Item: Constitution +1. Price: 1 system point. After a moment of consideration, Blayn decided how to allocate his points. Ding! The host has exchanged 6 system points for Constitution +6. Ding! The host has exchanged 2 system points for Strength +2. Ding! The host has exchanged 2 system points for Agility +2. For now, Constitution was his top priority. It was crucial for determining whether he could properly use the double Kamui jutsu. That didn't mean strength and agility were useless. Both attributes played an essential role in enhancing his physical combat skills. His body techniques set the baseline of his combat prowess, while the double Kamui jutsu determined his upper limit. Until he could freely use the double Kamui jutsu, his body techniques remained indispensable. But achieving full control over the double Kamui jutsu was easier said than done. For instance, Obito could only use single Kamui freely because he possessed Hashirama's cells. Kakashi, who inherited Obito's Six Paths power, merely obtained a 1-minute trial of the double Kamui. This implied that Blayn's constitution had to surpass the strength of Hashirama's cells, at the very least, to use double Kamui without restrictions. And even then, it was only a possibility. Clap, clap. Just then, Blayn heard the sound of applause. Isdeth was clapping as she looked at him. A splendid display. You're quite strong. You flatter me, Blayn replied modestly. He had already noticed that Isdeth's physical abilities were superior to his own. As one of the Empire's generals, she was undoubtedly among the strongest in the nation. If you need money, you should harvest the valuable parts from those danger beasts. If not, then get ready for dinner, she said before turning toward the fish-shaped danger beast she had already dismembered. Blayn fell silent for a moment. He had no idea which parts of a danger beast were valuable. Having just transmigrated into this world, he was completely broke, so earning some money was necessary. He would have to ask Isdeth for guidance later. By now, Isdeth had already started preparing food. She expertly whittled some branches into makeshift skewers, then sliced a large piece of fish into evenly sized chunks before threading them onto the skewers. She was obviously preparing grilled fish. Blayn had intended to help, but upon seeing Isdeth's swift and efficient movements, he realized there was nothing for him to do. At that moment, Isdeth glanced at him and said, "Just sit and relax. You saved my life earlier. Consider this a small way of repaying you." Blayn shook his head slightly and said honestly, "No, it was my fault. I accidentally woke up that special class danger beast, which led to your predicament." In his view, Isdeth didn't owe him anything. He had only resolved the situation he had caused. One thing doesn't cancel out another. Regardless of the circumstances, you still saved me, Isdeth replied. All right. Blayn accepted her reasoning. Soon, Isdeth started the fire and began grilling the fish. Her movements were so practiced that it seemed she had done this countless times before. Blayn and Isdeth sat by the fire, waiting for the fish to cook. Here, Isdeth handed him one of the first skewers of grilled fish. Thanks. Blayn accepted it, but, out of habit, used his Mangekyō Sharingan's insight to check if there was anything unusual about the fish before taking a bite. Despite being from a danger beast, the meat was actually even more delicious than the fish he had eaten in his previous life. In this world, many types of danger beasts could be turned into gourmet dishes. How does it taste? Isdeth asked. It's really good. Blayn replied with a serious expression. Isdeth gave a slight nod, seemingly satisfied with her handiwork. Where are you from? Are you here to hunt danger beasts? She asked abruptly. Blayn reacted quickly, fabricating an identity for himself. I'm from a small village in the Southern Empire, but it was destroyed recently by a special class danger beast. As the sole survivor, I had no choice but to wander. I see. Isdeth's face remained emotionless, and her tone lacked any trace of sympathy. The weak die. That's just how it is. Only the strong survive. Her words and the cold indifference in her voice sent a slight chill down Blayn's spine. Even though his story about the village and the danger beast was entirely fabricated, Isdeth's reaction was chillingly real. Survival of the fittest, taken to the extreme? No doubt about it. This woman is dangerous. At that moment, Blayn mentally labeled Isdeth as a beautiful but highly dangerous woman, though he didn't let it show on his face. How about this? Isdeth suddenly said, placing a hand on her chest. Come with me to the imperial capital. I can make you my direct subordinate, allowing you to skip the usual military enlistment process. You'd immediately rise to a position of power, second only to a general. That's far better than wandering aimlessly, isn't it? Blayn was silent for a moment before answering. I do plan to go to the imperial capital, but I don't like being bound by others. You won't be, Isdeth assured him. You'll belong only to my army, and I'll grant you as much freedom as possible. Even I have to leave the capital frequently to suppress foreign tribes and hunt danger beasts. That level of autonomy should be acceptable to you, right? All right. Blayn accepted Isdeth's invitation. He didn't know much about this world yet. Even if Isdeth hadn't invited him, he would have chosen to go to the imperial capital, the most important stage of this world. From there, he could slowly piece together what kind of place this truly was. 5. Chapter 5. Aiming to become a general, of course, Blayn didn't fully trust his death. Once someone earned the label of dangerous, it wasn't easy to remove. However, Blayn had his own trump card, the double Kamui. At the very least, he had no worries about protecting his own life. So, he didn't fear his death. Good. Then we'll spend the night here and head back to the imperial capital first thing in the morning, his death said. Blayn asked, since you're a general of the empire, why are you out here alone? I originally came with a squad of soldiers to hunt a special class danger beast, but the intel was wrong. Its strength was far beyond expectations, and during the battle, we also attracted several Class 1 and Class 2 danger beasts. In the end, I managed to take down the target, but I was the only survivor, Isdeath explained briefly. I see, sorry. I shouldn't have asked that, Blayn apologized. It's nothing. It's a bit of shame, but they were too weak, so they died. That's all. Isdeath was completely indifferent. Her deep-rooted belief in survival of the fittest made her regard the deaths of her soldiers as insignificant. Blayn remained silent. There was no point arguing with Isdeath over this topic. I'm full now. Could you teach me which parts of these danger beasts are valuable? He asked, shifting the conversation. Of course, but you don't know this already. Isdeath looked slightly surprised. Given Blayn's earlier display of skill, she had assumed he came from a tribe that hunted danger beasts for a living. Blayn shook his head. Before my village was destroyed, I rarely dealt with danger beasts, so I don't know much about them. In that case, I'll teach you. Isdeath stood up, walked to the corpses of the danger beasts Blayn had killed, and drew her long sword from the scabbard at her waist. First, this man-eating flower. Its valuable part is the golden section in the pistol. It has high pharmaceutical value. Demonstrating as she spoke, Isdeath used her sword to extract the golden pistol and handed it to Blayn. As a general, she had a high salary and numerous rewards. Unlike Blayn, she had no need for extra money. Next, she proceeded to explain and demonstrate how to extract valuable materials from each danger beast. Blayn quickly realized that Isdeath had extensive knowledge in this area. Curious, he asked, you seem very experienced with this, and even earlier when you were grilling fish. You were incredibly skilled. Did you grow up hunting danger beasts? Yes. I was born into the Partas clan, a tribe specialized in hunting danger beasts. We've been doing it since childhood, Isdeath explained. But later, my clan was wiped out by the northern tribes. Just like you, I was the only survivor. After hunting every danger beast in the region, I got bored and decided to enlist in the Imperial Army. Her tone remained completely indifferent, as if recounting an insignificant event. It was as if the annihilation of her entire clan wasn't even worth remembering. Blayn found her both frightening and somewhat pitiable. Perhaps it was that experience that shaped her extreme belief in the law of the jungle. But with such a mindset, she probably wouldn't appreciate his sympathy. In fact, she might find it strange. I see. For a moment, Blayn didn't know what to say. You can sell these materials for money in the imperial capital, but don't worry about finances. You'll have a generous salary soon enough, Isdeath added. As for the remaining danger beast corpses, they were of no further use. Night fell. Neither Blayn nor Isdeath planned to travel in the dark. Although Blayn's Mangekyō Sharingan allowed him to see clearly at night, using intangibility earlier had drained him significantly. Resting was the better option. Since Isdeath carried nothing but her weapons, both of them simply laid down on the ground to sleep. But it was still early, and with nothing else to do, they started chatting. How old are you? You look young, Isdeath asked. 18. You're not much older yourself, Blayn replied. He didn't mind chatting with Isdeath. There was nothing else to do, and casual conversation might help him gather useful information. It also felt natural. He wouldn't come across as having any ulterior motives. Then you're 2 years younger than me, Isdeath noted. 20? That's impressive. Becoming a general at such a young age is no small feat, Blayn praised. There are other generals around my age, actually. One of them is only 4 or 5 years older than me, Isdeath said. The person she was referring to was an agenda. At this time, Najina had yet to defect and was still Isteth's colleague, often accompanying her on military campaigns. Of course, since Blayn had never even heard of Isteth before, he certainly didn't know Najina either. You have the potential to become a general too. I hope you'll aim for that as your goal, Isteth added. Me? I guess I could give it a try. Blayn kept his answer vague. For now, he had no clear stance. Since he didn't fully understand this world yet, he could only take things one step at a time. Isteth was undoubtedly dangerous, but at least she wasn't hostile toward him. She was worth observing. Late at night, when it was time to sleep, both Blayn and Isteth simply lay on the ground. Blayn's physical endurance far surpassed that of an ordinary person, and Isteth was even more resilient. Sleeping outdoors posed no problem for either of them. However, their sleep wasn't particularly restful. They had to remain alert in case of sudden danger beast attacks. Blayn also kept his guard up against Isteth. At the slightest movement, he would wake instantly. Fortunately, the night passed without incident. It wasn't until early morning that a danger beast suddenly appeared and disturbed their rest. Isteth reacted first, swiftly cutting down the Class 2 danger beast with just a few strikes. Perfect timing. Now that it's morning, we should get going, she said, flicking the blood from her blade before turning to Blayn. All right, Blayn nodded. With that, the two of them set off toward the imperial capital, a city that had thrived for over 1,000 years. Chapter 6. Jisei City. Before setting off, Isteth adjusted her military cap. Her cap closely resembled those worn by the British Royal Navy, adding a touch of allure to her already striking appearance. Blayn also thought the cap suited her well. We're currently in the Empire's southern border region, far from the imperial capital. If we rely solely on walking, we'll waste too much time. Let's head to the nearest city, Jisei, and get 2 horses, Isteth said. Blayn nodded in agreement. On their way to Jisei City, they encountered several more danger beasts. Outside the imperial capital and major cities, danger beasts could be found almost anywhere. City walls weren't just built to defend against rebels, foreign invaders, and hostile tribes. They also served as protection against these deadly creatures. Working together, Blayn and Isteth swiftly eliminated the danger beasts. Ding! The host has hunted a level 4 danger beast. Reward, 1 system point. Ding! The host has hunted a level 3 danger beast. Reward, 3 system points. However, due to Isteth's overwhelming strength, Blayn only managed to take down 2 danger beasts. The rest were killed instantly by Isteth. I killed 10, and you only got 2. That means I win, Isteth remarked, casually crushing the skull of the last danger beast beneath her boot. In the distance, the towering walls of Jisei City came into view. Yes, you're incredibly strong, Blayn said, conceding without argument. Though, to be fair, he never agreed to a competition in the first place. Before long, they reached the city gates. The guard stationed there moved to check their identities. Isteth, having only recently been promoted to general, was well known in the imperial capital, but in a remote city like Jisei, her fame hadn't spread as widely. In a world resembling an ancient feudal empire, information traveled slowly. Unless someone had seen Isteth's portrait, they wouldn't recognize her on sight. Hey, you two, where are you from? State your names. One of the guards barked at them in a rude tone. Before Blayn could respond, Isteth grabbed the guard by the hair with one hand and effortlessly slammed him to the ground. Before the man even had time to react, Isteth's high-heeled boot came down, shattering the bridge of his nose with a sickening crunch. Effa! The guard let out a blood-curdling scream. The other guards stood frozen in shock, never expecting anyone to cause trouble here. Who the hell is that woman? She's gorgeous, but she's absolutely ruthless. She just attacked a city guard like it was nothing. I want to say well done. Those bastards abuse their power all the time. Last time, a guy got beaten half to death just for speaking up. They even tossed him outside the walls to be eaten alive by danger beasts. I just feel bad for such a beauty. That scumbag governor won't let her off the hook. But we better keep our voices down. If we get caught talking about this, we're dead. The commotion quickly drew the attention of bystanders coming in and out of the city. Many began whispering among themselves. Blayn, seeing that he didn't need to intervene, simply stood by and watched the scene unfold. Within moments, all the guards at the gate surrounded them. Yet, both Blayn and Isdeth remained utterly calm, unfazed by the situation. Isdeth had absolute confidence in her strength. Blayn, on the other hand, was not only strong himself, but also knew Isdeth's true identity. "You don't have anything to prove you're a general?" Blayn quietly asked. "I do, but I never bring that kind of thing when I'm out hunting," Isdeth replied coldly. Blayn sighed. "So what now? If it comes to it, we'll just slaughter them all," Isdeth said, her voice laced with chilling indifference. A dangerous smile appeared on her beautiful face, a mix of excitement and cruelty. Blayn was momentarily speechless. Jisei City was within the Empire's territory, meaning it technically belonged to the same nation Isdeth served. These guards were supposed to be her subordinates, yet she was ready to kill them without hesitation. He didn't necessarily disagree with her ruthless approach. This was a world where the weak were preyed upon, after all. But Isdeth's interpretation of survival of the fittest was extreme. "Wait, I think she might be General Isdeth." Just as Isdeth was about to draw her sword and start killing, one of the guards finally recognized her. He had seen her portrait by chance. The images had only recently arrived in Jisei City and were currently displayed in the governor's mansion, though they hadn't yet been widely circulated. "General Isdeth, are you serious? The youngest general in the Imperial Army? I swear it's her." "Then we're doomed. We just pulled our weapons on a general. Shut up and start bowing. Maybe we can still survive." Panic-stricken, the guards dropped to their knees, frantically kowtowing. They weren't just enforcers of the Empire's corrupt system. They also understood how terrifying it was. Offending a general was practically a death sentence. Fortunately for them, Isdeth was relatively lenient toward her own subordinates. She ignored the groveling guards entirely, not sparing them so much as a glance as she strode through the city gates. Blayn followed closely behind. Only after Isdeth and Blayn had disappeared into the city did the guards dare to stop bowing and lift their heads. "Phew! Thank the heavens she didn't hold it against us." "Who was that guy with her? A deputy officer?" "No way. He wasn't even wearing a proper uniform. Looks more like a personal companion, if you ask me." "Who cares? We barely escaped with our lives. Focus. Someone needs to report this to the governor now." Once inside Jisei City, Isdeth headed straight for the governor's mansion, demanding 2 quality horses. The governor had already received word of her arrival from the city guards. "General Isdeth, it's an honor to have you here. Just 2 horses? I have plenty of fine goods. If there's anything that catches your eye, please take it as a gift." The governor was a plump, middle-aged man who greeted Isdeth with an ingratiating smile. "I don't need anything else," Isdeth replied coolly, tossing a pouch of coins onto his desk. She never accepted bribes, nor did she want to owe favors to men like him. Of course. The governor didn't dare argue and quickly ordered his men to bring over 2 of the best horses. Blayn and Isdeth mounted their new steeds and continued on their way. However, just as they were about to leave the city, a disturbing scene caught their attention. On the streets of Jisei, a young nobleman with golden hair, dressed in lavish robes, was openly assaulting a young woman and her small daughter. Beside them, a man, likely the husband, lay on the ground, severely wounded and unconscious. Chapter 7. Execution of the Shingi user. "Papa, Papa. She's just a child. Someone, please help us." The young woman cried out in desperation, her voice raw with grief. Beside her, a little girl, her face streaked with tears, clung to the unconscious, gravely injured man. It was clear that the man was the woman's husband and the girl's father. "Sykes is at it again. That bastard has no limits. I've seen him do things like this far too many times. He's the governor's son, spoiled, arrogant, and untouchable. No one dares to stop him. That family is as good as dead. The husband being unconscious might actually be a mercy. At least he won't have to witness what happens next." The onlookers only dared to whisper among themselves, their steps quickening as they passed. No one wanted to stay and watch the horror that was about to unfold. Sykes had already begun tearing the woman's clothes, while one of his guards held the little girl. It was clear she would suffer the same fate soon. No matter how much the mother and daughter screamed, no one stepped forward to help. Not because they didn't want to, but because they couldn't. The governor controlled the strongest forces in Jisei City, and his son, along with his guards, wielded unchecked power. Opposing them meant certain death, and it wouldn't stop there. Anyone who dared interfere wouldn't just lose their own life, their families would be dragged down with them. A quick execution would be a mercy. More often, men were tortured and women were violated. His death, however, remained indifferent. Blayn, on the other hand, couldn't stand by any longer. He spurred his horse forward, charging straight toward the scene. "Who the hell are you? Stop right there!" The guard shouted, stepping forward to block his path. Blayn didn't slow down. In fact, he only urged his horse to go faster. Sykes, who was moments away from fully stripping the woman, was forced to leap aside to avoid being trampled. His face twisted in irritation as he turned to glare at the blood-red-eyed young man on horseback. Blayn pulled his horse to a stop in front of the woman, though the little girl was still in the grip of a guard. "You little bastard, you dare stand against me?" Sykes sneered, his expression darkening. Blayn didn't waste words on filth like him. Without a word, he dismounted. Sykes' face contorted with fury. His eyes filled with murderous intent as he barked. "Cut him down." At his command, the guards immediately drew their weapons, swords, axes, and spears glinting in the sunlight. Someone actually dared to step in? That young man is brave. But it's pointless. He won't change anything. He'll just die along with them. The gathered townsfolk whispered their sympathy. As the guards closed in, Blayn made the first move. He dashed toward one of them, a swordsman. Fust! The guard barely had time to react before slashing his sword toward Blayn in a panic. But to Blayn, the attack was slow. Effortlessly, he sidestepped the blade. Then, with a powerful knee strike, he drove his knee into the man's gut. Crack! The swordsman's face twisted in agony. His body convulsed as he doubled over, retching. His strength vanished instantly. Seizing the moment, Blayn snatched the sword from the guard's grip and, without hesitation, slit his throat. The remaining guards hesitated, now realizing that this young man was no ordinary fool. Not far away, Isdeth watched the scene unfold, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. She hadn't expected Blayn to intervene for mere civilians. "You useless trash." Sykes, furious at his guard's incompetence, cursed as he stalked toward Blayn. "So you got some skill. Let's see if you can entertain me." His face twisted into a sadistic grin. He enjoyed the thrill of crushing others. A massive, dark green war hammer materialized in his hands. The craftsmanship alone made it clear this was no ordinary weapon. Blayn immediately recognized it as something unusual. The very next moment, Sykes moved, exploding forward with unnatural speed. He swung the hammer straight for Blayn's skull. But Blayn's Mangekyō Sharingan tracked his movements with ease. Leaning back, he dodged the lethal strike, then retaliated. Sykes suddenly felt a sharp pain as Blayn's sword slashed across his abdomen. He staggered, shocked at how fast his opponent had reacted. But the pain only fueled his rage. "You little bastard, I'll turn you into a stain on the ground." With a roar, Sykes' hammer suddenly expanded to more than 10 times its original size. The immense weight strained his arms, causing his veins to bulge and burst. But he was too crazed to care. His only focus was crushing Blayn. Blayn could react fast enough to see the attack coming, but physically dodging the colossal hammer's wide swing was another matter. Realizing this, he activated intangibility. Boom! The hammer slammed into the ground with earth-shaking force, sending tremors through the street. The ground where it landed caved in from the impact. It was a horrifying display of destructive power. "Ha ha ha ha!" Sykes threw back his head and cackled. He was convinced he had smashed Blayn to pulp. Then, his laughter abruptly stopped. A cold blade pierced straight through his throat. His eyes widened in sheer terror. Blayn stood before him, completely unharmed. Impossible. He had seen that attack land. He had felt the impact. Yet Blayn was standing right there, without a scratch. What? What the hell is he? Sykes never got an answer. Blayn stomped on his chest, pinning him to the ground. Then, without a shred of hesitation, he drove his sword into Sykes' heart. Sykes convulsed briefly, his face frozen in terror. Then he stopped moving. Ding! The host has executed a Shingu user. Reward: 10 system points. Shingu were weapons created by an emperor 500 years ago in an attempt to replicate the legendary 48 Taigu. The attempt failed. These inferior copies were far weaker than the originals and were mockingly referred to as Shingu. However, even as failures, Shingu still vastly outclassed ordinary weapons. The Warhammer's ability to enlarge more than tenfold had been one of its unique properties. Isdeth's eyes gleamed with interest. She had witnessed it clearly. Blayn had taken the full force of the hammer without dodging, and yet he emerged from the impact completely unscathed, like a ghost passing through solid matter. Then, in one seamless motion, he had struck Sykes down. Blayn's Taigu is truly formidable, she murmured to herself. 8. Chapter 8. Teased by Isdeth, it seemed that Blayn's Taigu could also affect others. Isdeth recalled their first encounter when Blayn had used intangibility on both of them. As Sykes was actually killed? Who was that young man? Could he be a Taigu user? Sykes' Warhammer was an incredibly powerful Shingu, yet that young man defeated him so easily. Even if he's not a true Taigu user, he's at least strong enough to fight one. He got exactly what he deserved. That scum terrorized people for far too long. He finally met someone who wouldn't tolerate his tyranny. The townspeople were both shocked and delighted that Sykes had been slain. However, none of them dared to celebrate too loudly, fearing potential retaliation. After killing Sykes, Blayn turned his cold gaze toward the remaining guards. They had all been his accomplices, and just moments ago, they were ready to cut him down. He had no intention of letting them go. 2 of the guards were still frozen in shock, unable to react. Blayn swiftly cut them down. The rest panicked, dropping their weapons as they tried to flee. But Blayn wouldn't give them a chance. He pursued and eliminated them one by one. Their desperate, uncoordinated escape only sealed their fate. If they had scattered in different directions, they might have had a chance. After all, even with his superior speed, Blayn wouldn't have been able to chase all of them down. Meanwhile, Isdeth showed no reaction to Blayn's slaughter of Sykes and his men. She certainly wasn't about to reprimand him. In her mind, the weak being killed by the strong was simply the natural order of the world. Once the fight was over, Blayn approached the young woman and her daughter. "It's over now. Take him to get treated. He should survive. Here, take this." He tossed him a bag of coins. The him he referred to was the bloodied, unconscious man, the young woman's husband. As for the money, Blayn had picked it off one of the dead guards. He didn't need it, but this nearly shattered family did. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Even after quickly adjusting her clothes, the young woman still looked disheveled. Sykes had nearly torn them to shreds. But at this moment, she didn't care about her appearance. She only cared about expressing her gratitude to her savior, bowing repeatedly. Her daughter followed suit. Blayn smiled softly, a sincere, unguarded expression of relief. Then, the mother and daughter helped the injured man to his feet and left. Blayn turned to mount his horse, but before he could, he noticed Isdeth striding toward him with an imposing air. His expression immediately grew serious. He had never lowered his guard around her, not for a second. Was she upset that he had acted on his own? That he had killed so many people, including the governor's son? After all, Isdeth was an imperial general. It would be entirely reasonable for her to side with the governor of Jisei over a stranger she had just met. A governor wasn't a minor official in the empire. Blayn braced himself, fully prepared for a battle. But when Isdeth reached him, he sensed no hostility. Then, suddenly, she raised her right hand. Blayn's Mangekyō Sharingan immediately tracked her movement. She was reaching for his chin. It wasn't an attack. Because of that, Blayn didn't waste his energy activating intangibility. Instead, he instinctively took a half step back. However, Isdeth immediately closed the distance, gently pinching his chin between her thumb and forefinger. Blayn blinked in confusion. "What are you doing?" He had expected her to confront him. Instead, she was teasing him. He couldn't wrap his head around it. All around them, the watching townsfolk erupted into murmurs. Is this a public seduction? But that guy is crazy strong. How is he the one getting teased? Look at her uniform. It's not just any military outfit. Could she be an officer of the Empire? Maybe they're just a couple flirting? If that ice-cold beauty is an Imperial officer, no wonder that guy dared to kill the governor's son. Feeling the odd stares from the crowd, Blayn, who had been indifferent just moments ago, suddenly found himself feeling a little embarrassed. Smile again. Isteth's tone was firm, almost commanding. What? Blayn was completely lost now. I want to see a more genuine smile, she said bluntly. The one you had just now, it moved me a little. The natural smile he had shown when speaking to the mother and daughter had stirred something in her. She didn't understand why. Up until now, Isteth had never thought about things like love. The concept had simply never entered her mind. She had no idea what this strange, subtle feeling meant. All she knew was that she wanted to see Blayn's real smile again. Not just a faint one, but a true, wholehearted smile. A smile? Blayn was even more confused now. Did I smile just now? He vaguely remembered unconsciously smiling in relief. But being asked to force a smile? That wasn't something he could do. He wasn't the type to smile often. Occasionally, he might do it instinctively, but forcing it felt unnatural. Besides, a Mangekyō Sharingan wielder smiling? Wouldn't that just make him look like one of those deranged Uchiha lunatics? Of course, that was just his own perception. He had never actually seen what his own smile looked like. This is kind of difficult for me, he admitted awkwardly. Really? Isteth tilted her head slightly, then murmured, Are you embarrassed because of all the people watching? Blayn opened his mouth to correct her misunderstanding, but before he could, she had already decided that was the case. Well then, she said casually, we don't have to rush. Once we're back in the Imperial capital, you won't have to be shy in my room. Wait, that's not. Blayn started to protest, but Isteth didn't give him the chance. Besides, she continued, it seems we have a little problem right now. Blayn turned his head and saw them. From all directions, a large number of guards were closing in. It was clear why. Sykes, the governor's son, was dead. Chapter 9. He's mine. As the guards from the governor's mansion surrounded the area, Governor Severe arrived in a rage. They didn't yet know who had killed Sykes, but they were about to find out. Sykes. Severe ran to his son's lifeless body, his grief-stricken voice echoing through the square. Who killed my son? His bloodshot eyes burned with fury, his presence alone sending a chill through the crowd. No one dared to move. No one dared to meet his gaze. After all, Severe was even more terrifying than his son. Who saw the murderer? If anyone dares to protect them, you'll all die. His voice was laced with venom. He intended to find the culprit by any means necessary, even if it meant rounding up and torturing every single person in the area until someone confessed. The color drained from the faces of the townsfolk. Many of them had seen exactly who had killed Sykes. But to them, that young man had done the right thing. They didn't want Blayn to suffer revenge, but if they kept quiet, Severe would turn his wrath on them first. They were just ordinary people. Torture terrified them. It was only a matter of time before someone broke under the pressure. Before that could happen, Blayn stepped forward. It was me. What? You? Severe's face twisted in shock. He had assumed Blayn was simply one of Isteth's subordinates. Until this moment, he hadn't even considered the possibility that Blayn was the one responsible. General Isteth. Severe snarled, turning to her. That brat is your subordinate. You owe me an explanation. His fury was uncontrollable, but he still addressed Isteth with respect. In the Empire's hierarchy, a governor ranked below a general. Even so, he wasn't entirely beneath Isteth. He didn't have to bow and scrape before her. And no matter who Blayn was, Severe wanted justice for his son. Isteth didn't answer. Instead, she walked toward Severe. A faint smile played on her lips, one that carried a dangerous edge. No one else seemed to notice. No one except Blayn. But he didn't say a word. He was curious to see how Isteth would handle this. Severe assumed Isteth had come to negotiate. In his mind, he was already thinking about how to deal with the young man who had killed his son. Beheading him was too merciful. No, he wanted him slowly, brutally tortured to death. Only then could he begin to ease his rage. Isteth stepped right up to him. Up close, Severe couldn't help but admire her. Her beauty was unparalleled. Her figure, her poise, her aura, everything about her was utterly captivating. A vile thought entered his mind. If he played his cards right, maybe he could use this situation to his advantage. Maybe he could take liberties with her. Lust flickered in his eyes, and Isdeth saw it instantly. A moment later, her sword was in her hand, and it pierced straight through Severe's right eye. It happened so fast that Severe didn't even realize what was happening. He prided himself on being the strongest in Jisei City, far stronger than Sykes. He was a Shingu user, but against Isdeth, who wielded neither a Taigu nor a Shingu, he was utterly powerless. After all, Isdeth hadn't needed a legendary weapon to rise to the rank of general. She had done it through sheer ability alone. And in the near future, once she obtained a Taigu, she would become the undisputed strongest in the empire. For a split second, Severe was stunned. Then the pain hit, an agony unlike anything he had ever experienced. Agony! He screamed, clutching at his destroyed eye as blood poured from the socket. You thought you could order me around? Isdeth's voice was deathly cold. The very air around them felt like it had frozen. And no, that's not. Aggghhh. Before he could finish his sentence, Isdeth drove her blade into his other eye. Total blindness. For a man like Severe, who had lived in luxury, indulging in every pleasure imaginable, this was a fate worse than death. But Isdeth wasn't finished yet. As he collapsed to his knees, writhing in agony, she lifted her boot and stomped down on the back of his skull. Hard, with a sickening crunch, his head caved in like a crushed melon. Severe was dead before he even hit the ground. The guards surrounding Blayn and Isdeth stood frozen in horror. Some of them were trembling so badly that their weapons slipped from their hands, clattering onto the cobblestone. Isdeth didn't even spare Severe's corpse a glance. Instead, she turned to the remaining guards and said coldly, "He's mine. If you want to touch him, you'll have to go through me first." The weight of her gaze sent a shiver down their spines. It was not a threat. It was a promise. That was all it took. Panic broke out. The guards scrambled to flee, tossing away their weapons to run faster. Isdeth let them go. She had no interest in wasting her time chasing down such pathetic prey. Blayn, however, was once again taken aback by Isdeth's ruthlessness. Even a governor, an imperial official, was nothing to her. She could have easily sold him out. Yet she had crushed Severe without hesitation. Blayn doubted she had done it for his sake. It was more likely that Severe's arrogance had annoyed her, and that lustful look in his eyes had sealed his fate. Now that the governor is dead, no one is left to govern Jisei City, Blayn noted, stepping up beside her. It doesn't matter. The imperial capital will send someone to replace him, Isdeth said dismissively. But won't this cause problems for you? This whole situation started because of me. I should have handled it alone. Blayn had no intention of dragging her into his mess. Isdeth, however, merely smirked. It's no problem. If anyone gives me trouble for this, I'll just kill them too. She spoke as if it were the simplest thing in the world. And besides, she turned to Blayn, her smirk widening slightly. You mind? That means this concerns me too. 10. Chapter 10. Shingu dual blades don't say things that could be easily misunderstood. Blayn said, feeling slightly speechless. He could tell that Isdeth definitely didn't mean it that way, so he didn't give it any further thought. This guy had a decent Shingu. You can use it for now. With that, Isdeth used her long sword to hook the pair of crossed scabbards on Severe's back and then tossed them to Blayn. Blayn caught the scabbards, instantly recognizing that they contained two swords. Are both of these weapons Shingu? He couldn't help but ask. That's right. To be precise, they're part of the same Shingu because this Shingu is called dual blade style. Isdeth continued. Your Taigu is purely defensive, right? This Shingu will help balance things out by increasing your offensive capability. Though it was named dual blades, in works like these, swords and blades are often interchangeable, so dual swords could still be referred to by that name. I see. Blayn nodded slightly. He had indeed been lacking a proper weapon. He preferred swords over heavy weapons like war hammers, which was why he hadn't paid any attention to Sykes' Shingu before. As for Isdeth mistaking his double Kamui for a Taigu, He had no intention of correcting her. Letting her believe what she wanted was the best option. He hadn't confirmed or denied anything. It was entirely Isdeth's own assumption. Blayn secured the crossed scabbards onto his back, then curiously drew the swords. One was black, the other white. The black sword fit naturally in his left hand, while the white one settled in his right. They were identical twin swords, their only difference being color. The weight and balance in his grip were leagues apart from the standard long sword he'd taken from a guard earlier. The craftsmanship and quality were clearly superior. Judging by the name, the Shinga's ability was straightforward, allowing the user to wield both blades simultaneously. When it comes to Taigu, a person can only wield one at a time. That's an iron rule. Any more would overload the body and be life-threatening. At this moment, Isdeth decided to explain further. Shinga may not be as extreme as Taigu, but in most cases, a person can only own one. Dual blades is an exception. Even though it consists of two swords, the strain it places on the user is no different from that of a single Shingu. While it doesn't have any special abilities beyond allowing dual wielding, its base stats are exceptional. Both its offensive power and durability surpass those of ordinary Shingu. That said, using both a Taigu and a Shingu at the same time, won't that put too much strain on your body? If it feels like too much, just discard it. Even after all that, Isdeth still expressed concern for Blayn's physical state. Very few people could handle equipping both a Taigu and a Shingu simultaneously. The burden was usually too much to bear. "I'll be fine, at least for now," Blayn replied. His Mangekyō Sharingan wasn't a Taigu, but he had to admit, Shingu were extraordinary. He could clearly feel the added strain when wielding this one. However, his physical strength far surpassed that of ordinary people. The burden was negligible, and as his body grew even stronger, he would barely notice it at all. Good. Satisfied with his response, Isdeth collected Sykes' Shingu, a massive warhammer. Of course, she had no intention of using it herself. A weapon like that didn't suit her at all. She planned to turn it in at the imperial capital. Shingu weren't meant to be left in the hands of commoners. With that, Blayn and Isdeth continued on horseback toward the capital. Before long, news of the governor's death spread across Jisei City. "I heard the governor was killed in the streets." "Is that true?" "Of course it's true. His son, Sykes, was the first to die. Then the governor tried to avenge him, but he got taken out too. Word is it was General Isdeth from the imperial capital who killed him. The governor was definitely killed by General Isdeth, but Sykes was taken out by some young man. Apparently, that young man is her lover." "General Isdeth? What's a general from the imperial capital doing here?" "Maybe she's just a righteous general who despises evil. After all, Severe and Sykes got exactly what they deserved. General Isdeth and that young man really avenged us." Given the distance between Jisei City and the imperial capital, it was inevitable that they would encounter multiple danger beasts along the way. However, with his new Shingu, Blayn's efficiency in hunting them had increased significantly. His black and white swords were razor sharp, and there was no need to worry about durability. Even after slaying several danger beasts, they showed no signs of wear. At that moment, Blayn used his black sword to sever the head of snake-like danger beast and immediately followed up with his white sword, stabbing into its brain. In his experience, decapitation alone wasn't enough to kill a snake, so he assumed the same principle applied to the snake-type danger beast. Sure enough, it wasn't until he delivered the finishing strike that the system notification echoed in his mind. "Ding! Host has slain a Class 2 danger beast. Reward: 5 system points. This time, I hunted 6, and you took down 5 danger beasts. I suppose that means I win, just barely." Isdeth adjusted her military cap, which had been tilted slightly due to the battle. She figured that once she returned to the imperial capital, it would be time to choose a proper Taigu. After all, against truly powerful opponents, especially superclass danger beasts, she was still at a disadvantage. A Taigu would change that. The imperial capital's current minister controlled a number of Taigu, and every newly promoted general had the opportunity to select one. Isdeth, who firmly believed in the law of the jungle, would never let such an opportunity slip by. She had no interest in Shingu. Only Taigu were worth her attention. She had simply been too busy since her promotion to visit the minister and claim one. I never said we were competing, Blayn muttered in exasperation. Maybe it was because he had been aggressively hunting danger beasts to earn system points, but his actions had unintentionally sparked Isdeth's competitive nature as well. 11. Chapter 11. The kind and simple young lady finally, Blayn and Isdeth arrived in the imperial capital. The moment the guards at the southern city gate saw Isdeth, they immediately stepped aside to let them pass. There was no way they wouldn't recognize General Isdeth. Though they didn't know who Blayn was, it was clear that he was traveling with Isdeth, so they didn't stop him either. Only 2 of them returned. I remember General Isdeth leading thousands in a battle. What happened to the rest? There must have been an accident. If it were just a single special class danger beast, it wouldn't have turned out this bad. Still, General Isdeth looks completely fine, so there's no need for us to worry. As Blayn and Isdeth disappeared into the city, the gate guards exchanged hushed whispers. Upon entering the imperial capital, the contrast was immediately apparent. It was far more prosperous than Jisei City, but that was to be expected. It would be laughable if the capital were less developed than a regional city. In the distance, the grand and imposing royal palace stood tall, the residence of the emperor himself. However, even in such a prosperous city, poverty was still visible. There were destitute people scattered along the streets, some barely surviving. Well, this is a feudal empire, after all, and a corrupt one at that. General Isdeth, we've got new dishes on the menu today. Be sure to stop by and try them. I guarantee you'll love them. A restaurant owner called out enthusiastically as they passed. I will. I'll come by when I have time. Isdeth replied with a friendly nod, showing no signs of arrogance. General Isdeth, our shop is offering huge discounts. Come take a look. General Isdeth, as they walked through the bustling streets, Blayn noticed that many shopkeepers seemed to know Isdeth personally, greeting her with familiarity. More surprisingly, Isdeth responded with equal warmth, carrying herself without the air of a high-ranking general. Blayn found himself seeing another side of her. She was kind and approachable toward the common folk, but when it came to the truly downtrodden, the impoverished, the abused, the persecuted, she held not a shred of sympathy. In other words, Isdeth treated her people well, but that didn't mean she actually cared about them. If a powerful individual committed atrocities against the weak, she wouldn't even bat an eye. To put it bluntly, in her worldview, the weak deserved to be trampled by the strong. The strong could do as they pleased with the weak. The only reason she didn't personally harm them was because she had no interest in doing so. But if they were her enemies, then it wouldn't matter if they were old, young, sick, or disabled. She would show no mercy. Blayn couldn't help but think to himself, this woman's personality is truly something else. I need to meet with the Prime Minister to handle some matters and arrange your status and position. In the meantime, take a look around and familiarize yourself with the capital. If you run into any trouble, just mention my name, but try to avoid it if possible. As they neared the royal palace, Isdeth gave Blayn these instructions. Got it. Blayn nodded slightly. It was the perfect opportunity to sell the danger beast materials he had gathered along the way. Keeping them on him served no purpose. With that, the two temporarily parted ways. As he wandered through the city, Blayn came across a shop that dealt in danger beast materials. You looking for something, young man? Or maybe you've got something to sell. I can give you a fair estimate. The shopkeeper greeted him with a wide grin. These are danger beast materials. Blayn placed a bundle of cloth-wrapped materials on the table. The shopkeeper's eyes widened. There were at least a dozen different kinds. This young man looked fairly young, but if he could hunt this many danger beasts on his own, he was clearly powerful. Sensing a valuable customer, the shopkeeper quickly adjusted his offer, giving Blayn a slightly higher price than the market rate. Of course, he wouldn't take a loss. His profit margin would just be a bit slimmer. Consider this my way of making a new friend. If you ever need anything, be sure to come back to my shop, the shopkeeper said with an even brighter smile. All right, Blayn accepted the bag of coins, tucking it into his inner pocket before leaving. Carrying so much physical currency was a hassle. He suddenly found himself missing the convenience of digital payments from his previous life. Here, money was divided into gold, silver, and copper coins, each with its own value. Since he was paid entirely in gold coins, it wasn't too bad. But if he had been given silver or copper coins, the sheer quantity would have been an even bigger headache. After finishing his business, Blayn continued to explore the city, taking in its sights and observing the daily lives of its people. As he aimlessly roamed the streets, a carriage suddenly pulled up beside him, accompanied by several guards. Having spent some time in the capital, Blayn had already gotten a sense of the social hierarchy. One glance was enough to tell him that this was the carriage of a wealthy noble. Ordinary citizens couldn't afford such luxury, let alone travel with an escort. Inside the carriage sat a young noblewoman. She wore an elegant blue dress, her golden curls framing a delicate, adorable face. She was slender, and the jewelry she wore was clearly expensive, far beyond what any commoner could afford. Blayn wasn't sure why the carriage had stopped next to him, but then he overheard the girl speaking to her escort. "My lady, you're at it again. I can't help it. I just like doing this." With that, the girl stepped down from the carriage and walked straight toward him. "Do you need something from me?" Blayn asked. Are you from out of town?" "You don't look like a local," the girl said with a bright, cheerful smile. A faint blush dusted her cheeks. "Yeah, I just arrived in the capital," Blayn replied with a slight nod. It didn't surprise him that she could tell his attire was noticeably different, and he had been wandering aimlessly, looking as though he had no particular destination. "Do you need any help? You seem a little lost. If you don't have a place to stay, why don't you spend the night at my house?" She was warm and enthusiastic, her demeanor exuding the innocence of a kind and simple noble lady. 12. Chapter 12. Cute on the outside, vicious on the inside. I'm not lost, just wandering around. But I don't have a place to stay yet. Blayn replied. Then come to my house. It's quite big, and I can even offer you some delicious food, the blonde girl said with a bright smile. Thank you for your kindness. I'll gladly accept your offer. Blayn didn't refuse. Of course, that didn't mean he naively believed this girl was as kind and innocent as she appeared. He was simply curious about how nobles lived in this world. A stranger going out of their way to be this friendly for no apparent reason? That was enough to make anyone wary. Who knew what kind of plan she might have for him? Even if she did have ulterior motives, he had nothing to fear. With double Kamui, he could handle anything. Besides, he had no idea how long his death would take to finish her business. He couldn't just wait around for her. He needed to explore the empire on his own and gather information through different means. Great. It's settled then. The blonde girl giggled, looking pleased with herself for helping someone. But I still need to do some shopping, so I won't be heading home right away, she suddenly remembered and informed Blayn. No problem. Walking around a bit sounds good. I'd like to get more familiar with the capital anyway. Blayn responded casually. Perfect. Then hop in the carriage with me. With that, she climbed back inside. The carriage was spacious enough to seat 4 people, and Blayn sat across from her. My lady, is this really appropriate? One of the guards standing outside hesitated. After all, Blayn looked like an ordinary commoner. It wasn't just improper for him to sit in the same carriage as their lady. They also had concerns about her safety. It's fine. There's nothing to worry about, the blonde girl reassured them. All right then. The guards had no choice but to go along with it, continuing to escort the carriage while keeping a close eye on what was happening inside. By the way, what's your name? I'm Arya. The girl introduced herself. Blayn, he answered. Blayn? That's such a nice name. Arya prized. Suddenly, she leaned in close, staring directly into his eyes. Blayn could feel her breath on his face and instinctively leaned back slightly. Your eyes are really special. They look amazing, Arya remarked as she observed his blood-red pupils, which bore an intricate pattern. Is that so? Thanks. Blayn was a little surprised by the compliment. But at that moment, Arya's true thoughts were far from kind. A filthy country bumpkin like him dares to have such beautiful eyes? She had already decided. She would sweet-talk him into coming home with her, then carve out those mesmerizing eyes as a keepsake before torturing him to death. Yet outwardly, her expression remained the picture of innocence, her sweet smile perfectly masking the cruelty within. Seriously, if only I had eyes as beautiful as yours, she said with an air of longing. Are you unhappy with your own eyes? Blayn asked. He found it odd that a girl like Arya would admire his Mangekyō Sharingan. To him, these eyes were indeed impressive, but more because of their power and aesthetic appeal. Most girls probably wouldn't think the same way. I don't think mine look that good. It's always been a bit of a bother, Arya replied, nodding. I don't think they look bad at all. In fact, they're as beautiful as sapphires. Blayn spoke honestly. Arya's large, bright eyes were already stunning, and they paired perfectly with her golden curls and turquoise irises. He couldn't understand why she would think otherwise. You really think so? Arya seemed genuinely surprised. Of course. I think you should have more confidence in your beauty, Miss Arya. Blayn nodded. Arya fell silent for a moment, her previously smug expression briefly freezing. Moments ago, she had been entertaining the idea of ruthlessly torturing him to death, yet now something inside her wavered, just for a second. But only for a second. The hesitation vanished as quickly as it came, and she soon regained her usual bright smile. You're right. I should be more confident. Thanks, Blayn, she said cheerfully. The carriage came to a stop in a busy shopping district. As soon as Arya stepped out, she excitedly hurried toward a clothing store, two of her guards following close behind. Blayn, on the other hand, had no interest in shopping, so he remained by the carriage. One of the guards was left behind as well, tasked with watching over the vehicle. Seemingly bored, the guard struck up a conversation with Blayn. See that palace over there? As an outsider, you probably don't know what our emperor is like. He gestured toward the grand structure in the distance. They were deep within the imperial capital now, and the royal palace sat at its very center, surrounded by towering walls. Ordinary citizens likely had no chance of ever stepping inside. I'd like to hear more. Blayn was genuinely interested. He knew little about the emperor and wanted to learn more about how the empire was run. The emperor is actually just a child. He doesn't rule the empire. The one pulling the strings from behind the scenes is the prime minister. The guard's expression darkened. He's the one responsible for the empire's corruption and darkness. The imperial capital is an even crueler place than you might think. Then, lowering his voice, he added, but you'd best keep your mouth shut about this. Even though it's common knowledge, if the wrong person hears you talking, you might just lose your head. Blayn gave a small nod. I understand. This was useful information. And the prime minister, the guard mentioned. He was likely the same one as Death had referred to earlier. Blayn also couldn't shake the feeling that the guard was subtly warning him about something. If the capital was truly as corrupt and ruthless as the guard described, then was Arya's kindness genuine? He hoped he was overthinking things, but still, he made sure to stay on guard. Not long after, Arya emerged from the store. She wasn't carrying anything herself, but her two guards were practically drowning in bags, their arms and even heads piled high with purchases. With a sweet and innocent smile, Arya waved at Blayn. Blayn, come over here. Let's go shopping together. 13. Chapter 13. Flirting with other girls, all right. Blayn accepted Arya's invitation. Then let's go. Next, we'll check out that shop. Arya looked adorable, her eyes sparkling with excitement. My lady, wait for us. The two escorts hurriedly chased after them after placing all of Arya's purchases in the carriage. Blayn, is there anything you want? I can buy it for you, Arya asked. Not for now. I'll just have a look, Blayn replied. As they continued, Arya entered store after store, buying an absurd amount of goods. It was as if she bought anything that caught her eye, like she was stocking up rather than shopping casually. With her family's wealth, she had no reason to hold back. The ones suffering, however, were her two escorts, who were struggling to carry all the purchases back and forth. Blayn, as a bystander, said nothing but was undoubtedly surprised by Arya's excessive shopping habits. I think that's everything. Let me see if there's anything else I need to do. Arya pondered for a moment before exclaiming, Oh, right? I just need to get my hair done. Your hair? Blayn asked curiously. Yeah, I go every so often to straighten my curls. Unfortunately, natural curls never stay straight, and it's such a hassle, Arya sighed. You don't like your natural curls? Blayn questioned. Of course not. They're so ugly. Can't you tell? Arya frowned in frustration. Whether it was her previous dissatisfaction with her eyes or now her discontent with her naturally curly hair. This was the real her, so real that she could easily torment and kill out of jealousy. In the original story, Tatsumi's childhood friends, Ayasu and Seo, fell victim to Arya and her family's deception. Ayasu was poisoned with the Labora virus by Arya's mother, who had a habit of observing infected individuals and documenting their conditions. Ultimately, he died from the illness that, as for Seo, Arya tortured her to death simply because she envied her long, straight black hair. However, Blayn knew none of this. If he had, he wouldn't still be interacting with Arya. "I really can't tell," Blayn said sincerely. "I think you look great, just as you are." "You're just trying to make me feel better," Arya muttered, though she did feel a bit comforted. To her, outsiders from the countryside were no different from livestock, and she hardly took a farm animal's words seriously. "I'm being honest. Blonde hair with natural curls isn't ugly at all," Blayn said matter-of-factly. "Miss Arya, you really don't have enough confidence in your own beauty. You're already so cute." Even though Arya viewed Blayn as a mere outsider, she couldn't deny that being called cute pleased her a little. For some reason, she suddenly felt no desire to torment or kill him. Maybe she should just let this guy go. Just then, Blayn felt a chilling gaze on his back, making his spine tingle. Instinctively, he turned around, only to meet Isdetha's icy stare. Her beautiful face was cold and slightly shadowed with displeasure, as if something had upset her. "Blayn, what's wrong?" Arya asked, noticing his sudden reaction. Following his gaze, she turned around and locked eyes with Isdetha. Instantly, Arya felt suffocated. Terror drained the color from her face as she quickly looked away. She recognized the woman immediately, General Isdetha. But why was she here? And why was she looking at her with such a terrifying expression? "You seem to be enjoying yourself, flirting with other girls," Isdetha remarked as she approached, her voice carrying a strange undertone. She had just received her Imperial Arms, the ice-based Taigu, Demon God Manifestation, Demon's Extract from the Prime Minister. Taigu were incredibly powerful weapons, but they required compatibility with their users. If the affinity was lacking, they couldn't be wielded properly. Isdetha's Taigu, created from the blood of a legendary superclass danger beast from the northern lands, was a blood-based weapon. Many had tried using it before her, but even a small sip of the blood drove them insane with bloodlust. Isdetha, however, not only resisted the Taigu's madness, but also drank the entire container of blood without hesitation. It was a perfect match, because she was already consumed by an inherent thirst for slaughter. Demon God Manifestation. Demon's Extract was hailed as one of the strongest Taigu, though much of that reputation stemmed from Isdetha's own overwhelming power and mastery over it. At this moment, the mark on her chest symbolized her bond with the Taigu. Having secured her new power and taken care of other matters, she had gone looking for Blayn. It didn't take long. She had merely asked the Imperial Guards patrolling the city streets where he was. And then, she had seen him, shopping, walking side by side with some blonde girl. The sight inexplicably irritated her. "I'm just showing her around while familiarizing myself with the capital," Blayn said calmly. Arya suddenly realized that Blayn actually knew General Isdetha, and their relationship was clearly unusual. Otherwise, why would Isdetha look at her that way? Wait, if he knew General Isdetha, then was he really just some random foreigner? Would a mere stupid outsider have the chance to associate with someone of her stature? But at this point, she no longer cared about Blayn's origins. Isdetha was now standing before her. Even though Isdetha had approached for Blayn, Arya was still terrified. She knew she wasn't entirely uninvolved in whatever was happening. Under the sheer weight of Isdetha's presence, Arya's body froze. She couldn't even bring herself to breathe properly. No matter how wealthy her family was, they were still just merchants. They had no power to stand against the overwhelming might of General Isdetha. 14. Chapter 14. Vice Captain of the Imperial Capital Security Force. Let's go. "I'm done here." With that, Isdetha prepared to leave with Blayn. "Where to next?" Blayn asked. "I'll take you to get acquainted with your new position." As they left, Isdetha didn't spare Arya a single glance. She wasn't entirely sure why she felt irritated, But the reason was simple. At this point, she had no real concept of love. Romantic feelings had never crossed her mind. It wasn't until later that something clicked, making her suddenly interested in the idea of a relationship. And when that happened, she had 5 key requirements for a potential partner. Ambition, preferably someone aiming to become a general. Courage, even if unarmed, he should be willing to hunt danger beasts with her. A background similar to hers, someone from the border regions, not the imperial capital. Younger than her, easier to dominate. Apurismide. From Isteth's perspective, Blayn happened to meet nearly all of these criteria. The only thing missing was the pure smile. He had only ever shown a genuine smile once, back in Jisei City, and that single moment had left an impression on her, though not strong enough to be considered love at first sight. Still, since she had yet to understand romance, she wasn't aware of what these feelings meant. She just knew she found the blonde girl annoying for some reason. For Arya, however, being ignored by Isteth was a relief. She had been scared out of her wits moments ago, her face still deathly pale. Seeing Isteth walk away without doing anything to her, she let out a heavy sigh of relief. "And my lady, we should leave quickly," one of the guards whispered nervously to Arya, his voice trembling. After all, who wouldn't panic at the sight of General Isteth? Arya nodded quickly and quietly slipped back toward the carriage. Meanwhile, Isteth's presence had drawn the attention of nearly everyone in the area. She was immensely popular in the imperial capital, not just for her beauty, but for her overwhelming strength as a general. More importantly, she was known as the most approachable general in the empire, treating commoners far better than most nobles did. Wasn't that Lady Arya? I heard her family is not exactly normal. They trick newcomers into trusting them, then lock them up and torture them. I've heard that rumor too. Looks like she tried to lure in another young man, but it turns out he's someone General Isteth knows. That must be it. That guy's definitely no ordinary person. Just look at how casually he talks to Isteth. He doesn't act like one of her subordinates. That crazy noble nearly got herself into serious trouble this time. While the crowd continued murmuring amongst themselves, Arya's carriage quickly sped away, loaded with her excessive shopping haul. "My lady, we really almost offended someone untouchable this time." The guards were still shaken by their encounter with Isteth. As Arya's personal guards, they were well aware of her family's twisted hobbies, something they never dared to question. They were just hired hands, and none of them were foolish enough to risk their jobs or their lives over a misplaced sense of justice. The only one with any conscience was the guard who had spoken to Blayn earlier. He had subtly tried to warn him, but hadn't dared to be too direct. In the original story, this same guard had also given Tatsumi a vague warning, though Tatsumi completely failed to pick up on it. Knowing just how depraved Arya's tastes were, the guard were understandably terrified. If something had actually happened to that young man, their lives would have been in danger as well. After all, Isteth was infamous for her cruelty. I thought he looked like an outsider, but I never imagined he actually knew that crazy woman. Arya's face darkened, suddenly losing the charm she had displayed earlier. Since Isteth wasn't around, she freely referred to her as a crazy woman in private. At least she could be grateful she hadn't actually done anything to Blayn yet. Not that it mattered. She had already lost interest in him. Even if Isteth hadn't shown up, she wouldn't have bothered torturing him. Either way, she had dodged a bullet this time. As they walked, Isteth began explaining Blayn's new role to him. "I spoke with the Prime Minister, but there's no way to make you skip straight from a civilian to my deputy. Simply put, you lack the necessary merits," Isteth stated. "But I figured you wouldn't be satisfied starting as a regular soldier either. So after some discussion, the Prime Minister decided to place you in the Imperial Capital Security Force. They're short a deputy commander right now, so you'll be filling that position. It's already a pretty good starting point." Even when she first arrived in the Imperial Capital, Isteth had to prove herself in combat before earning a position as an official soldier. Given that soldiers were paid well, and the Empire was in a state of corruption, recruitment standards had only become stricter over the years. After all, the Empire couldn't afford to maintain a bloated army. In other words, Isteth had already bent the rules for Blayn. Getting him in as a regular soldier would have been an achievement, let alone making him the deputy commander of the Imperial Capital Security Force, a position much higher than an ordinary soldier. It was a safe, comfortable job. No need to march in a battle, just routine patrols around the city. That's actually pretty good. Thanks, Blayn said, recognizing how much effort Isteth had put into securing this for him. This is just your starting point, Isteth replied. With your abilities and potential, I have no doubt you'll earn the merits needed to become a general soon enough. It was clear this was what she wanted for him, to rise through the ranks, to reach for the same goal she had once set for herself. Yeah, I'll do my best, Blayn answered. He wanted to see more of the imperial capital, more of the empire itself. If he became a general, he would have a broader perspective, more insight into the workings of the world around him. Only then could he decide what he truly wanted to do in this world. But let me make one thing clear, Isteth said suddenly. You may not be joining my campaigns just yet, but you're already mine. If you ever need anything, come to me. And another thing, I don't want to see a repeat of today's events. Her tone shifted as she reached out, pinching Blayn's chin and tilting it up slightly. Do you understand? 15. Chapter 15. The Empire's strongest. Hearing the unmistakable authority in Isteth's voice, Blayn couldn't help but feel a little helpless. He had figured it out. Isteth was the embodiment of a queen, and her desire for control was overwhelming. Didn't you say you'd give me freedom? But here you are, still trying to control me, he said as he took a step back, breaking free from her grip on his chin. Blayn had no interest in being dominated. He wasn't a masochist. I meant relative freedom, not absolute freedom, Isteth said coolly. Besides, do you even know what that woman's true nature is? That woman? You mean Arya? Blayn asked, curious. It seemed like Isteth knew something about her. That's right. Her name is Arya, and she's a repeat offender. She regularly deceives newcomers from the countryside, luring them into her home, fulfilling their desires just to toy with them before torturing them to death, Isteth said matter-of-factly. Of course, someone like you wouldn't have ended up as one of her victims, but just know she had no good intentions toward you. The atrocities committed by Arya's family weren't exactly a secret, just something the general public remained unaware of. Their victims were usually naive outsiders who had just arrived in the imperial capital. Isteth, naturally, was well aware of their crimes, but she had never been interested in dealing with them. I see. Blayn nodded slightly. Though he had been wary of Arya, he hadn't expected her sweet exterior to hide such cruelty. Thinking back, it was hard to tell how much of what she had said to him was the truth. Still, now that he was about to become the deputy commander of the Imperial Capital Security Force, he might just have the chance to deal with that twisted noblewoman. But surely others know about this too. Has no one ever done anything about them? Blayn asked. By his standards, this was an unspeakable crime. And yet, not only had Arya and her family avoided punishment, but it seemed like no one had even attempted to intervene. If it were a case of the power of wealth, he might have understood. But Arya's family wasn't some high-ranking political force, just a wealthy noble house. The fact that they could act so brazenly without consequence was absurd. It could only mean one thing. Whether it was the officials at the top or the Imperial Capital Security Force at the bottom, the Empire simply didn't care about the lives of outsiders. And perhaps, even the lives of its own citizens weren't valued. The Empire was even darker than he had imagined. I don't know, and I have neither the interest nor the patience to care about such things, Isteth replied bluntly. Figures. Someone like you wouldn't care about things like this. Blayn sighed. Their worldviews were completely different. But he wasn't going to waste time trying to change her. Isteth had spent 20 years shaping her beliefs. There was no way she would suddenly alter them just because someone told her to. Oh, you talk as if you know me well, Isteth said, intrigued. Then tell me, what kind of person do you think I am? Probably a queen-like personality? And someone who strongly believes in survival of the fittest, Blayn answered honestly. You're not wrong. Isteth made no attempt to deny it. You believe in survival of the fittest so strongly. Is it because of your childhood experiences? Blayn asked. Maybe. If my father and the rest of my clan had been strong enough, they wouldn't have been slaughtered by the northern tribes. Isn't that a simple truth? she replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. But Blayn wanted to argue, but ultimately chose not to. Then again, you're right, he said. The northern tribes were invaders, but in a world where the strong rule over the weak, having reason on your side means nothing if you lack power. The weak are trampled regardless of how just their cause may be. It was like that old saying, fall behind, and you'll be left to suffer. If a nation is destroyed, if its people are wiped out, then concepts of justice and evil become meaningless. The only thing that matters is strength, the ability to survive. No matter whether it was his previous world or this one, both operated under the same brutal rule. The strong thrive, the weak perish. This truth was undeniable, but Isteth's interpretation of it was extreme. See, we get along just fine, Isteth said with a smirk, assuming Blayn was starting to agree with her. Blayn remained silent and instead changed the subject. So, you don't hate the northern tribes? He asked. Of course not. The weak being slaughtered is natural. But regardless of what they did to my people, it won't change the fact that I'll slaughter them when I go to war, she said indifferently. Maybe your people were weak, Blayn admitted, but they didn't deserve to die. They were innocent. Their deaths weren't natural. Isteth's expression turned slightly cold. Not wanting to start an argument, Blayn continued. I'm just stating my opinion. That's all. But I am curious. If I were stronger than you, what would you, as the weaker one, think then? If that ever happens, then whether you kill me, make me your servant, or force me into submission, I won't have any complaints, Isteth said with a cold smile. But unfortunately for you, that won't happen. I will be the strongest in this empire. She wasn't boasting. If anything, she was the only one truly qualified to say those words. Now that she had obtained the Ice Taigu, her absolute strength was inevitable. What she didn't realize was that Blayn wasn't bound by the rules of this world. As a transmigrator, he was an anomaly, one she couldn't predict. We'll see about that, Blayn said with a faint smile. He wasn't planning anything strange, but he was certain of one thing. Dealing with his death in the future was going to be troublesome, and the best way to handle trouble was to be stronger than it. Just then, Isteth suddenly changed the topic again. Without warning, she reached out and gently touched Blayn's face. You can smile, can't you? Why not smile a little brighter? Her sudden shift in demeanor completely shattered the previously tense atmosphere. In an instant, the conversation's intensity vanished, replaced by something entirely different. 16. Chapter 16. The Justice Girl, Seryu molested again. Feeling the cool, soft touch on his face, Blayn realized just how cold Isteth's hands were. With a speechless expression, he moved her hand away. If you want me to smile on command, I won't be able to. Still, he couldn't help but notice the subtle changes in her. It wasn't just her hands. There was a faint chill radiating from her entire body. It was barely perceptible, but Blayn's sharp senses picked up on it. She hadn't felt like this before. Then there was the mark on her chest. He had noticed it earlier, but hadn't said anything about it until now. That mark on your chest. It wasn't there before, was it? Blayn finally asked. He suspected that whatever was changing about his death had something to do with that mark. Could it be related to the Taigu she had just obtained? That's right. I received my Ice Taigu today. After drinking a full pot of blood, this mark appeared, Isteth explained. Blood? So there are Taigu that use blood too. Blayn was a little surprised. He had always assumed Taigu were physical weapons, blades, swords, spears, hammers, and so on. But now a blood-based Taigu had entered the mix. This is my first time seeing one as well, but the 48 Taigu are all unique and unpredictable. You don't seem very familiar with them, do you? You should take some time to study ancient records. If you ever face another Taigu user, you don't want to be caught off guard by an unknown ability, Isteth suggested. Yeah, I'll look into it. Blayn nodded. His biggest weakness right now was a lack of knowledge about this world. When it came to Taigu, he was completely in the dark. Isteth was right. Understanding them would be crucial. Even though he had double Kamui, he couldn't afford to be careless. He still didn't know if there was a Taigu out there capable of countering it. Blayn had since parted ways with Isteth and was on his way to report to the Imperial Capital Security Force. As he walked through the streets, someone suddenly called out to him. Excuse me, are you Blayn? Hearing his name, He turned his head. Standing before him was a young girl with orange hair tied in a high ponytail, bright orange eyes, and a cute appearance. She was dressed in a gray breastplate and shoulder armor, standard gear for the security force. Despite her friendly and cheerful smile, Blayn had learned his lesson from Arya. In a place like the Imperial capital, he wasn't about to take people at face value. "That's me," he replied. "We received orders from General Esteth to escort you," the orange-haired girl said, giving him a formal salute before introducing herself. "I'm Saria Ubiquitous, a new recruit in the Imperial Capital Security Force." At this point, it seemed that Saria had not yet obtained her biological Taigu, magical beast transformation, Hecatonkires. Otherwise, she would undoubtedly have Koro with her. "I'm new here too. No need to be so formal," Blayn said. "That's different. You're the vice captain. I'm just a rookie. We're in completely different leagues," Saria corrected him. "All right then." With that, Blayn and Saria set off toward the security force headquarters. Along the way, Saria eagerly struck up a conversation, her cheerful energy apparent. "Vice Captain Blayn, what made you join the Imperial Capital Security Force? You must have some noble ideals, right?" She was clearly curious. The security force members didn't know much about Blayn's background. All they knew was that he had been appointed by the Prime Minister and personally recommended by General Esteth. As a result, many assumed he was some kind of rising talent. Nothing that noble, really. Blayn felt a little awkward, unsure how to answer. The truth was, he had simply taken the position as a means to learn more about the world. "Come on, you're just being modest, aren't you?" Saria grinned, unconvinced. "I, on the other hand, joined the security force to uphold justice and eliminate all evil." Her expression turned serious, her gaze filled with conviction. She wasn't joking. "That's an admirable goal," Blayn said, but only if her sense of justice was truly just and not something twisted. Of course, he didn't know anything about her yet. From his perspective, if she genuinely had a strong sense of justice, maybe she could bring some light to the darkness of the Imperial capital. That wouldn't be a bad thing. Right? Saria beamed, clearly pleased that the vice captain had acknowledged her sense of justice. Before long, they arrived at the security force headquarters. "Vice Captain Blayn, we're here," Saria announced. Looking around, Blayn noticed that all the security force members wore the same breastplate and shoulder armor. This uniform was clearly a symbol of their unit. There weren't any complicated formalities. Since he had already been assigned the role of vice captain, all that was left was to meet the captain and familiarize himself with the rest of the team. And apparently, Saria was assigned to assist him with that. Blayn was starting to think she was just a rookie doing errands. "Vice Captain Blayn, I'll take you to meet Captain Ogre first," Saria said. "Captain Ogre is incredible. He even has a nickname, Ogre the Demon. Criminals are terrified of him. If I had his strength, I'd be able to carry out justice even better. That's why I'm trying to become his apprentice." "Is that so? Well, good luck with that," Blayn responded casually. A few moments later, they arrived in front of a large office. "Captain Ogre is inside," Saria said. "All right, thanks." Blayn pushed open the door. Inside, sitting behind a large desk, was a tall, middle-aged man with a vicious scar over his left eye. Blayn's attention was quickly drawn to the room itself. It was far more extravagant than he had expected. Was the captain of the Imperial Capital Security Force really living this luxuriously? "Captain Ogre, this is Vice Captain Blayn. I've brought him here," Saria said respectfully, saluting again. "Good." Ogre nodded, giving her a look that signaled she was dismissed. Turning to Blayn, he spoke in a polite tone. "Vice Captain Blayn, we don't know much about you, but we do know you're no ordinary man. Looking forward to working with you." Despite his position, Ogre wasn't putting on airs. After all, anyone personally endorsed by General Esteth was not someone he dared to treat lightly. 17. Chapter 17. A gentle and kind person, Blayn and Ogre exchanged a few pleasantries, keeping the conversation friendly. There wasn't much to talk about, and after some formalities, their discussion came to an end. After leaving Ogre's office, Saria continued leading Blayn around to meet the other members of the force. As they turned a corner, voices drifted over from the other side. out of sight. Is that idiot Seiryu still going on about justice all the time? Yeah, she's been like that since day one. She's almost 20 now, isn't she? And she's still this naive. She really has no idea what the Imperial Capital Security Force actually does. Then again, she's an out-of-town recruit, and you guys dump all the grunt work on her. She doesn't even get to join us for the fun stuff. Hey, keep your voice down. You never know who might be listening. Hearing this, Seiryu abruptly stopped in her tracks. Seiryu, Blayn's voice carried a hint of concern. I am fine, she said, lifting her head with a forced smile. Blayn remained silent. As a newcomer with average strength, Seiryu was an easy target for bullying. It was likely that even escorting him today was a task someone had dumped on her. But he was also curious. What exactly do they mean by fun stuff? Without hesitation, he stepped forward and asked, what was that interesting thing you were talking about just now? Who's there? The group of soldiers immediately spun around. They saw Seiryu standing there, accompanied by an unfamiliar young man. However, something about him seemed oddly familiar, like they had seen him somewhere before. The one with spiky hair was the first to realize. He suddenly recalled a certain portrait, and this guy's face, especially his distinct eyes, matched it. And he was with Seiryu. Plus, no outsider could just waltz into the security force's headquarters, which meant Vice Captain Blayn. The man quickly straightened up and saluted. The others, realizing what was happening, followed suit. As for Blayn's question, none of them dared to answer. Blayn didn't press them. He figured that, given some time, he'd find out for himself what the security force was really up to. Instead, he continued, by the way, do you guys make a habit of picking on Seiryu? Cold sweat immediately formed on their foreheads. And no, I've never done anything like that. Some shook their heads frantically. Others looked guilty, avoiding eye contact. It better stay that way, Blayn said casually. He hadn't actually done anything to them, but the message was clear. From now on, they'd think twice before messing with Seiryu. Even bad-mouthing her in private would come with risks. Seiryu, realizing that Blayn was standing up for her, was visibly surprised. For a moment, she simply stared at him, stunned. Then, gratitude welled up in her heart. Ever since she arrived in the imperial capital, this was the first time someone had treated her with such kindness. Afterward, she continued leading Blayn through the security force headquarters. As they walked, she suddenly said, Vice Captain Blayn, you're such a kind and gentle person. I wouldn't say that. I just thought they were going too far, so I reminded them, Blayn replied. He didn't see his actions as anything special, just what any decent person would do. No, my intuition is very sharp. Vice Captain Blayn is definitely a just and righteous person. I should learn from you, Seiryu said, her tone filled with conviction. Blayn noticed how stubborn she seemed about this and decided to change the subject. By the way, how did you and the others recognize me so quickly? You already have a portrait of me. He was genuinely curious. This was his first time meeting the security force members, and technology in this world wasn't advanced enough for cameras to exist. Yet Seiryu had recognized him instantly, and so had those soldiers. Yeah, Generalist Death gave us a portrait. I happen to have it right now, Seiryu replied. She actually had one made? Let me see. Seiryu nodded and pulled a rolled-up piece of parchment from her uniform, handing it to him. Blayn unrolled it and was immediately stunned. The artwork was abstract. To put it bluntly, it was only slightly better than a child's doodle. The only truly recognizable features were his blood-red eyes and the rough depiction of double Kamui. The portrait was crude, but the facial features were somewhat similar. With his distinct Mangekyō Sharingan, it wasn't hard to identify him from it. Who drew this? Blayn asked, though he already had a strong suspicion. No idea. I just know that Generalist Death had it sent over, Seiryu said. Got it. Yeah, it had to be his Death's masterpiece. He never would have expected someone as dominant and powerful as her to be absolutely terrible at drawing. Not that he planned on saying anything about it. After settling into his role at the security force, Blayn went to see Ogre again. He had unfinished business. Captain Ogre, are you aware of a noble family that lures in outsiders and kills them? Blayn asked directly. Oh yeah, now that you mention it, They haven't paid their protection fee this month. About time we sent someone to remind them, Ogre said nonchalantly. Blayn's brow furrowed. Protection fee? You know they prey on innocent people, and you're protecting them? Of course. Who cares about some country bumpkins? As long as we're getting paid, what's the problem? Ogre grinned. That noble pays us a hefty sum every month to indulge in their little hobbies. Honestly, it's a pretty sweet deal, don't you think? Blayn was silent for a moment. Then, standing up, he said in a cold voice, Too bad. I'm dealing with them soon. Ogre froze, taking a second to process what he had just heard. Then his eyes widened in shock. Well, you're joking, right? I don't joke about things like this. With that, Blayn turned and walked away. Ogre sat there, his expression darkening. This brat didn't take the ogre seriously at all. 18. Chapter 18. The change in Seiryu. Although this kid might be someone valued by the Prime Minister and Generalist Death, that was only a possibility. From his interactions with him, Ogre saw nothing more than a naive young man, willing to eliminate a noble who brought significant benefits to the imperial capital just for the sake of some useless outsiders. Wasn't that the behavior of a reckless fool? At this moment, Ogre had already decided to kill Blayn. As a local tyrant, he had only been polite to Blayn out of respect for Generalist Death. But now this kid dared to disrespect him so blatantly. He was practically asking for it. Ogre had plenty of ways to make someone disappear without a trace. As the captain of the Imperial Capital Security Force, he had done such things more times than he could count. Generalist Death was often away on military campaigns, leaving her little time to oversee matters in the imperial capital. In the end, cases like this would be forgotten, and no one would dare hold him accountable. In his view, Isteth couldn't possibly care too much about this kid, so there shouldn't be any problems. Not long after leaving Ogre's office, Blayn happened to run into Seiryu. Vice Captain Blayn, you just came from Captain Ogre's office, right? Was there evil that needed judgment? Seiryu's expression was full of excitement. Something like that. There's a noble who takes pleasure in torturing and killing foreigners who come to the imperial capital. Blayn briefly explained the noble's crimes. What unforgivable evil! Seiryu gasped in shock. She couldn't believe something like that could happen in the imperial capital. She immediately asked, what did Captain Ogre say? Are we going to judge that wicked noble right away? It took a protective stance. That noble regularly pays protection money to the security force, Blayn replied. What? That can't be possible. Seiryu was utterly stunned. To her, Captain Ogre was a relentless enforcer of justice, feared by all evildoers as the Demon Ogre. She couldn't believe he would ever do such a thing. The truth was, Ogre had always been like this, whether in this timeline or the original one, extorting merchants, shielding corrupt nobles in exchange for money, illegally amassing wealth, and framing innocent civilians when things went south were all routine for him. But Seiryu had never been exposed to these matters and had no idea what kind of person Ogre truly was. In her eyes, he was the very embodiment of justice. That was why, after Ogre was assassinated by Night Raid, she saw them as absolute evil and pursued relentless vengeance against them. Anyway, that's the situation. I'll handle the noble myself, Blayn said indifferently. Wait, let me talk to Captain Ogre. There must be some misunderstanding, Seiryu said urgently. Without waiting for a response, she immediately ran off to find Ogre. Just as Ogre was contemplating the best way to get rid of Blayn, a sudden knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. He snapped out of his musings and said coldly, Come in. Seiryu quickly pushed open the door and stepped inside, speaking urgently. Captain Ogre, I've heard what Vice Captain Blayn said about that noble. I think there must be some kind of misunderstanding. You would never tolerate such evil, right? Hearing this topic come up again, Ogre's patience wore thin. He snapped, Are you kidding me? Those nobles are the ones paying us. Only an idiot would get rid of them. Seiryu was completely dumbfounded. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. At this point, Seiryu had yet to demonstrate her extraordinary talent, so Ogre didn't care about her in the slightest. Her so-called talent was her ability to form a contract with the biological Taigu, magical beast transformation, Hekatonkyres, which she later named Koro. In its normal state, it resembled a small dog. Only after this did the Imperial Capital Security Force start valuing her. Originally, she had been tricked into becoming a test subject. To put it bluntly, they never even considered her a person. Everyone else who had attempted to bond with Hecatonkires had died. It was only later that Ogre took her in as his apprentice, carefully keeping her in the dark about his crimes, maintaining his image as her righteous mentor. But right now, Seiryu was nothing more than an ordinary recruit, even ridiculed as a fool by many of her colleagues. Naturally, Ogre couldn't care less about her. He wasn't worried about her reporting him, either. The majority of the Imperial Capital's officials and generals were already corrupt, covering for one another. Who would believe the words of a naive girl? And if she became a problem, well, he could always silence her. He'd just make both Blayn and Seiryu disappear. Get lost before I really get angry, Ogre said coldly, as if he were shooing away a stray dog. Seiryu stood there, her head lowered. Her lips parted slightly as if she wanted to say something, but in the end, she turned away, utterly heartbroken, and walked out of the room. Her steps were stiff and unnatural. The weight of what had just happened had shattered her worldview. Outside, Blayn had been leaning against the wall, silently listening to the conversation inside. As expected, the outcome was exactly what he had anticipated. He let out a quiet sigh and turned to leave, ready to focus on more pressing matters. He didn't say anything to Seiryu, deciding it was best to let her process things on her own. But just as he was about to leave, Seiryu suddenly lunged forward, grabbing the front of his shirt. Her head was lowered as she trembled, unable to hold back her sobs. Tears streamed down her face. Why? I always believed Captain Ogre was a true enforcer of justice. Who knows? Maybe this is just human nature, Blayn murmured after a brief silence. Hearing her sobs, his gaze softened. Without thinking, he reached out and gently patted her head. Though he wasn't particularly close to Seiryu, she was the only one in the Imperial Capital Security Force who shared his views on that noble. However, Seiryu quickly regained her composure. She wiped away her tears and straightened up. I'm very sorry, Vice Captain Blayn. That was disgraceful of me. It's fine, as long as you're back to yourself, Blayn said with a faint smile. Please wait a moment. I'll grab my gear. Then I'll accompany you to purge this evil. Without another word, Seiryu dashed back to her dormitory, returning moments later with a massive sword, one that looked completely out of place with her petite frame. Chapter 19, A Fierce Side. You're using such a heavy greatsword as your weapon? Looks like you've got some serious strength, Blayn remarked. It's not too bad. I've been training in martial arts since I was a kid, but I'm still nowhere near Vice Captain Blayn's level, Seiryu replied with a cheerful laugh. She strapped the great sword onto her back with ease, moving as if it weighed nothing. Before they began their mission, Blayn made sure to allocate his points. System points, 24. These were all accumulated from his previous hunts of danger beasts. Ding. Host has exchanged Constitution plus 14, deducting 14 system points. Ding. Host has exchanged Strength plus 5, deducting 5 system points. Ding. Host has exchanged Agility plus 5, deducting 5 system points. As always, Blayn prioritized Constitution in his stat distribution. Final attributes. Constitution, 40 Strength, 27 Agility, 27 in terms of raw physical ability. Setting aside the double Kamui jutsu, Blayn still had a long way to go. He had come to realize that the people in this world possessed an incredibly high physical potential. His death was an obvious example, but even Seiryu's raw physicality surpassed what was considered the human limit in his previous world. Ordinary people were weak, but the strong were truly strong. After asking around, Blayn quickly learned the location of Arya's family estate. Wearing the breastplate and shoulder guards of the Imperial Capital Security Force, he and Seiryu were immediately recognized as enforcers. Some passers-by eagerly approached to curry favor, likely conditioned by frequent extortion, hoping a bit of flattery might make the officers go easy on them. Blayn, of course, ignored them. Upon arriving at their destination, they found themselves in front of a grand and luxurious mansion. It stood in stark contrast to the common buildings that lined the streets. This noble's wealth, is even more ridiculous than I expected, Blayn murmured. Wow, it's huge. Seiryu gasped in amazement. This is the power of the—
No more novels? Take part in the voting. The most requested novels and those with the most likes will be chosen for publication on euroaudiobooks.com. There, I can upload as much as I want without the risk of receiving a strike. Our 18 novels and other content that exceed what is morally acceptable are only published on Patreon or the free novels page. Remember, the site is funded by donations on Ko-fi and Patreon memberships.